And this morning, the suspect charged in the targeted killing of a healthcare exec remains behind bars in Pennsylvania. Luigi Mangione is fighting extradition to New York after being denied bail. The suspect shouting and struggling against officers as he was brought into court.
I'm completely out of touch and insult the intelligence of the American people and lived experience.
Mangione's lawyer says his client will plead not guilty to the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, dismissing the list of evidence police say links him to the crime.
Listen, I haven't seen any evidence that says that he's the shooter. The fundamental concept of American justice is a presumption of innocence, and until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and I've seen zero evidence at this point.
NBC's Stephanie Gosk is in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. Also with us, retired FBI Assistant Director and NBC News Senior National Security Analyst Frank Figliuzzi and former federal prosecutor Barrett Berger. Okay, Stephanie, where does this case stand this morning with Mangione now fighting extradition to New York?
So, Anna, he's fighting extradition, which could slow it down for a couple of weeks, but likely is going to move forward at some point. And officials here in Pennsylvania and New York thought it would be a little bit easier. But in that hearing yesterday, his newly acquired defense attorney stood up and said that his client was going to fight extradition. We were in that courtroom. Mangione was interesting. He was calm, relaxed, even smiling at times. That was totally different from how he presented himself on his way in, shouting at cameras. In terms of the investigation, law enforcement officials have not said what the motive may have been in this case, allegedly, but we do know that they are looking at his feelings about the health insurance industry in general. And NBC News has learned that there is an internal analysis of the investigation where investigators say that he may be looking at this as a kind of this murder of Brian Thompson as a kind of, quote, symbolic takedown. They're also analyzing those 3 handwritten pages that were found when he was arrested, broadly criticizing, according to 3 law enforcement officials, the health industry in general, but also specifically mentioning United Healthcare, calling the industry parasites. But they have not said that he had a specific motive up until this point. He also said in those pages that he was not working with anyone. And while the NYPD has not said they have found any evidence that he was working with someone else, they are keeping open that possibility. For now, as you mentioned, he's back in a Pennsylvania prison. The next scheduled court date is December 23rd, Anna.
Stephanie Gosk, thanks for bringing us the very latest. Barrett, is it unusual for someone to fight extradition to a neighboring state? What's the goal for Mangione to fight this?
Yeah, most defendants in an interstate extradition like this will consent. There's really only one reason to fight this: if you think that the requesting state has the wrong person. Because remember, the extradition process now is not concerned with the merit of the charges ultimately. It's about the identity. So right now the process is Governor Hochul will sign a warrant. It will be delivered to Governor Shapiro. He will sign it. It will be given to the court. Mangione will have a chance to try to contest it, to say, you have the wrong person. I'm not the person that's named in the charging documents in New York. But ultimately, he will be extradited. This just delays the process.
Frank, the cover of the New York Daily News highlighting Mangione's outburst we played outside of court, during which he said, and I quote, again, "It's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and their lived experience." What did you make of that moment?
So increasingly, and now with this latest statement, it's looking like Mangione is a cause killer. He's a mission killer. What does that mean? He's driven by ideology and not necessarily a direct personal beef with his targeted victim. Why is that significant? Makes it harder for detectives because, I'm certain that NYPD and United Healthcare Security were combing through their threat files. Every company keeps threat files. And as they're going through the names and they're saying, is this guy even insured by us? The answer might have been no, and he's never threatened us. That really causes a burn of resources. You got to do it. But don't expect a direct line. We haven't found that yet. Moreover, he simply did research. It's quite possible and found that United was the most egregious offender in his mind. So that makes it hard. The other thing is sympathy. A jury might look at this and go, yeah, I got my own terrible insurance story. So it impacts the investigation and possibly even the prosecution.
Mangione has retained an outside attorney who says he hasn't seen any evidence that says that Mangione's the shooter. Barrett, based on your experience and how prosecutors build a case, how strong is the evidence?
I mean, the evidence appears, at least from what we know right now, to be incredibly strong. I mean, if you look at just the fact of what he was actually arrested with when he was found in Pennsylvania, he had the ghost gun with the silencer, the fake documents that were used in New York. I mean, just on that evidence alone, not to mention all of the security footage that captured him and all the other evidence that prosecutors are going to be able to put together, it looks like their case is incredibly strong.
And Frank, other evidence are his writings, right? NBC News got in touch with a Substack writer who says he's corresponded with Mangione. He says they exchanged some 20 emails from April to June, and they spoke via video chat for a total of 2 hours, along with sending direct messages on X and Substack. And among other topics, he says Mangione complained about how expensive health care was in the U.S. The writer says Mangione also expressed interest in the ideology of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, saying Mangione disapproved of Kaczynski's deadly actions, but that he, quote, shared his concerns about rampant consumerism gradually eroding our agency and alienating us from ourselves. Frank, how does that fit into the investigation and a potential motive?
Yeah, this is eerily similar to the Unabomber case, which I touched on. I was assigned to San Francisco division in the FBI that was headquarters for the Unabomber investigation. We all had a piece of that, and yes, the manifesto has been read by Mangione of the Unabomber, and yes, he said I conclude that there are scenarios where it's ethical to murder someone. Very damning, by the way, as is his own little mini manifesto, where he basically confesses, yeah, I did this, it had to be done, they deserved it. So it's tough. And listen, for evidence, let's not forget, reportedly, NYPD got DNA off of the water bottle and possibly the cell phone. So they may have already, Pennsylvania may have already taken his DNA swab. If that's a match, this fighting extradition is going to be real quick.
Barrett, you just mentioned the gun investigators say Mangione had on him when they took him into custody, and we're learning they're looking into whether he made the gun or maybe whether somebody sold it to him. How does that impact the potential charges here?
Yeah, so these ghost guns are guns that are not sold as fully assembled firearms. Some of these can actually have components that are manufactured with 3D printers. So there's been reporting that some, at least maybe the casing of it was manufactured with a 3D printer. Remains to be seen, but that will form the basis of an additional charge. It's just important to remember that these are guns that are so difficult to regulate and for law enforcement to, follow and be able to track. So that's why they are such a pernicious threat.
Frank, how interesting is it or surprising is it that he was on the run for days after the shooting? And while we can't confirm that the gun he had on him was the gun used in the murder, how surprising is it that he didn't try to get rid of the gun? What does that tell you?
Yeah, my theory on that is, first of all, he may have been contemplating another target, thereby let me keep my weapon. Number two, he's more about making a statement than evading arrest. Hence, all the money in his, allegedly the cash found in his backpack, yet he didn't leave the country. He could have $8,000 in cash, a passport. He chose to go to Altoona, Pennsylvania, trying to ponder what's next for me. Didn't plan out this thing because it's not about escape for him. It's about making a statement.
And so now people, Frank, are selling merchandise, essentially glorifying Mangione, bracelets, T-shirts, even fake bullets and Christmas ornaments that bear the words deny, defend, and depose. What's your reaction to that? And do you worry about copycats, seeing how people seem to be connecting with this crime and this suspect?
My colleagues in corporate security for Fortune 100 companies, and particularly in the insurance industry, say this is a wake-up call. for them and for their CEOs. And so we've already seen some concrete actions taken, insurance companies taking their executives' names off their websites, going virtual for their annual share owners or investors meetings instead of in person, beefing up security. And in some cases, there was non-existent security on the CEO, and the CEO is now saying, you know what, I'm rethinking this. Maybe I do need security. For the police, yes, there is a valid concern for copycats out there. If this becomes the answer to society's problems with the corporate world, we're in for a lot of trouble. And I think we need to rethink how we approach this. The real heroes here are the folks at McDonald's, who are under threat, by the way. But a customer and an employee, they called 911. They should get the reward money. We should be lauding them, not threatening them.
The NYPD Deputy Commissioner addressed this sort of glorifying online presence related to the shooter and how people are looking at this case. Here she was on Morning Joe. Take a listen.
This guy's not a hero. He's not a hero. If you have any issues with somebody, we don't go out there and commit violence. We don't go out there and commit. This guy committed cold-blooded murder on our streets, and that's not something that we tolerate. And I don't think that he's a hero for that.
And Barrett, on top of this, Mangione's lawyers, if people have been calling in to his office, offering to pay Mangione's legal fees. Your thoughts about that? I mean, is that legit? Can people do that?
I mean, people can. I think ultimately this is all, I mean, look, this won't have any relevance for his legal case down the road. What this could do is be building some sort of almost jury nullification defense, right? If the prosecution's case is as strong as we were saying that it probably is, all of this, you know, he's a martyr and he was doing this on behalf of, you know, the little guy, all of that goes to some sort of jury nullification, hoping that he could ultimately find one or two people on the jury that were sympathetic to his cause that, you know, found it, even though it wouldn't be a legal defense, that they might find it some sort of an emotional or moral defense.